Hello and welcome to Reinfused. Today we are taking a look at a machine we actually have looked at before in a couple of videos, but we're taking a bit of a closer look at it and its history, because this is the month of Marchintosh, which is, you probably guess, a month of videos about the Macintosh. Yeah. And so, again, we're going to cover, possibly a few of you have already guessed, the Apple Pippin, which is actually a standard rather than a machine, but it's an interesting clone Macintosh that when people don't really talk about it as being a clone Macintosh, but that's really what it is. So I think it'd make an interesting video for Marchintosh, even though, like I said, we have covered before. It's a big enough topic anyway. So let's take a look. So here's the box. This is a Pippin app mark. It's by Bandai. Bandai made the app mark and the app work. We'll talk about that again in a minute. But before we open it, let's just go a little bit of history. So Pippin was effectively a technical spec rather than a machine, created by Apple in 1996. It was mostly intended to be a living room device with the object of making a Mac-compatible system that would be an integral part of your home audio-visual experience. Apple created a demonstration model called the Pippin Power Player, which showed it at various trade shows to help generate buzz and attract developers and hardware partners. Now, this proved to be moderately successful, certainly. Bandai signed up to create the app mark, which was the Japanese version and is white, and the at World version, which was the American one. Also, they signed up Cats Media, which made versions of this for Canada and for Europe, and that's kind of the almost the holy grail version of this, if you will, because it had a few extra features and stuff, and it was black as well. This is a nice white colour, but it looks very Mac actually as well in that colour scheme. The hardware is based on a 66 MHz PowerPC 603 processor. Depending on the model you have, it came with 6 or 8 megs, we kind of discussed that already, of combined system and video memory, so it was shared between the system and video. Now, this could be expanded, but whilst the processor was capable of addressing up to 64 megs of memory, the OS, which is kind of built in, which we'll go into that a bit later on, could only see 32 megs of that. Now, the software for the Pippin was specially encoded to only work on it, despite them being, at the time, standard Mac applications. They had kind of a special blessed folder which allowed it to boot up in an operating system, and it was all encrypted and stuff, so it would run. But it was possible to create CDs that would run on both, so you could have the blessed folder and also just a normal Mac one as well. System expansion is possible using a PCI compatible slot on the bottom of the Pippin. Some devices were planned, and an external floppy and hard drive connector is available. There's also open source versions of that as well. Just before we get into it, we'll kind of talk about the reasons why it failed, I guess. The Pippin failed for quite a few reasons. The price. The Pippin was an expensive and over-engineered machine. PowerPC Macs were not particularly cheap at that point. And although this was based not even the low-end model really, it's kind of the lower of the low-end models, it was still expensive to make, and the end price was expensive, especially for what it was. It was also trying to meet a demand that just wasn't there. It was trying to be a machine that sat under the television, which had some limited computer functionality. Things like web browsing and stuff were possible, and we'll see the controller when we open this up, and there's kind of special bits for that built into that. But it's edutainment heavy library, and there were some games as well. Again, we probably won't show any in this video, but we've done a video with the games and stuff. But it was mostly edutainment heavy, and they were really didn't fit just in the front room as such. Now, whilst this has been described as a games console, that's never really was Apple's intent. Now, was that Bandai's intent? Very possibly. Bandai have made consoles and do make games and have made games, etc, etc, etc. But certainly Apple didn't seem to be going that way. So there's this whole thing where the failure of the Pippin stopped Apple from being in the games market. But the fact is, Apple were kind of a big, serious computer company. They were never really going to be in the games market. Even later on with the iPhone and the App Store, it was still not a major focus of theirs, I guess, until it started making lots of money. So the idea that this kind of stopped them going to the games market, I think, is pretty fallacious. They weren't really going that way anyway, and they really did intend this as being a way of breaking into the living room and having a machine that was a computer that sat on the television and things like that, rather than a games console. Obviously, games could run on it, but it wasn't the primary focus. But this also meant that it was competing solely on the strength of its non-games library, and there were PCs that did that. You could buy a fairly cheap PC that sat in the corner of the room and did all that and showed encyclopedias and edutainment titles and stuff. So yeah, there just really was no niche for this at all. Right, well, that's enough of that nonsense. Let's actually take a look inside. It's quite a heavy box. The box is quite nice actually. If you look at the box, like nice orange labelling. There's kind of more of a line diagram on the back showing it off, and obviously the picture on the front, which you've seen. So I think it's quite a nice box all in all. Right, so if we open it up, and obviously this has been opened. This is my my one and only Pippin, so I've absolutely owned it. So it comes with, like many Macs do at the time, a kind of separate box with all the peripherals and stuff. So we take a look inside here, and this just lifts up. So we got ourselves all the documents, lots of paperwork and warranties and what have you, and manuals. We've got a little bundle of software that comes with it. This is mostly like browsing software and stuff like that. It's got AppMark Town, which was kind of supposed to be like an online social thing. Obviously didn't last long because this didn't last long. We got the modem for connecting. There is obviously an Ethernet option as well. Yeah, we got some cables we can use. That's good. Power cable. That's a Japanese one. The machine is by voltage as well, so you can actually, even though this is a Japanese one, I can use it on the English voltage, 240 volts, so that's good. Right, the controller. We may as well go over the controller. The controller, I feel, is the most fascinating thing about the machine. So if I just put that box to the side. So here's the controller, and you can kind of, you know what, let's zoom in a touch. So some of the features that kind of dictate what it was is the right here we got ourselves a trackball. It's very, very handy when you're doing things like web browsing. We've got these buttons at the back which act as kind of left and right trackball buttons, mouse buttons. We do have the usual D and action buttons, and we've got some buttons here which take you through screens and stuff. But one of the things which really do dictate that if it was built for the living room is, if you look here at the length of this here cable, it's still going. There you go. It's a huge cable. Yeah, like really long cable. Zoom. I mean, focus. Yeah, really, really, really long cable, which was obviously excellent for it being in the living room. The connector at the end here is effectively a form of ADB, so Apple Desktop Bus. So a lot of Mac specialists will understand that, and it's just kind of a more ruggedized version of that, but it's the same protocol basically. So yeah, that's the controller, which again I think is probably the most fascinating part of the machine, because it really does kind of show exactly what this machine was about. So now let's actually pull the machine out itself, and we will definitely have to zoom back out again for that, because it's a biggie. It is not a small machine. Oh, there's actually some manuals that I missed as well. Look at those. Even more manuals. Lots of paper. Lots of paper. Right, so take out the poly. This was unopened when I bought it, by the way, which you could get Pippins completely fresh in their boxes for very cheap when I bought mine. The prices, obviously, like all retro stuff, has crept up. But yeah, they were cheap to buy at one point. Right, so there it is, and it does look an awful lot like a Mac. Because it is, basically. So yeah, we can see our nice little PowerPC logo right there, and then the Pippin AppMark logo there. Nice big CD-ROM drive. These are our ADB ports and an activity light there, and that above it I think is a that's a headphone socket. I will have to check that. Across the top we've got all these media buttons, including our on-off power button there, which is really odd to use, by the way. It doesn't always do what you expect it to do. But on the back, and this is kind of where you see this whole thing is really massively over-engineered. Not only do we have our power supply that can select basically every voltage in the world, we've got a VGA output, we've got a switch to switch between PAL and NTSC. This can handle both. We have S-Video out, we have composite out, and we have our in and out audio jacks, so you can take audio in as well, and we have a printer, and this is the internet port. So right, and on the bottom you can see there we've got two trapdoors. So there's a big one here. If we open that up, that I believe is our memory connector, which is kind of like a weird push-in thing. And then this smaller one, where if you've seen a PC, you'll probably recognise what that looks like. Yeah, so that's our PCI connector, which lets us add in extensions like the floppy drive interface and also a SCSI interface, I believe, as well, things like that. So yeah, that's the Pippin, a machine which, yeah, is really just massively Mac that they tried to shove into the living room. So I guess the best proof of this being a Mac is to boot classic MacOS on it. So let's give that a try now. Right, here we are with the Pippin connected to a screen. Now normally I would capture this using my capture device rather than recording straight from the screen like this, but I wanted you to hear this thing start up. But then bearing in mind this was a machine that Apple expected to be in the living room. Now you can't obviously fully blame Apple for this. It was Bandai that built the machines, but they do take some of the blame, certainly. So if we just turn it on by pushing the... Now let me just say, in person, that's pretty loud. Certainly would not have fit well underneath the living room. It's louder, I would say, than any of the recent modern consoles. Right, now this will be a little bit blurry because I've got this via composite. I tried to do it via VGA, but I just couldn't get the colours to work correctly. So we are doing it via composite. Now, there are blessed CDs out there which will just boot MacOS without any trouble, but I also wanted to try something out. So a very clever programmer, whose links I will leave obviously in the description below, has made a thing called the Pippin Kickstart. And what this does, we just, at some point the eject button will let us eject. Come on. Yes, no. There we go. Now we've ejected. What this does is it will boot up, it will load, and then it will look for any valid MacOS, classic MacOS boot partition, and it will boot from that. So we can put anything on the CD that would run on a Mac of this era, will run on this. So this now eventually will be seen by the Pippin and will boot. There we go. It ejects the CD, but as you can see here, you might not be able to read that, but I can read it for you. Pippin Kickstart 1.1 by Blitter. Blitter.net/Pippin Kickstart. There's the URL, but it'll be in the below as well. Detected 1.0 ROM, 5 meg of RAM, patching SCSI Manager done, ejecting boot media done, and finding boot candidate. Right, so what this means is we can now put in a non-blessed volume, which is this one, and this will allow us just to boot it. Lovely little animation of the lock opening. Right, there we go. I think anyone that knows the classic Mac will just be able to see over the edge there and see the system modules loading in. And there's our little wristwatch and the classic look of the classic Mac dashboard. Right, so that's now basically finished booting in, and it obviously looks very, very similar. And now I can use our trackball here to, can you just about see, I think you can just about see the mouse pointer, and at the back here these are basically our mouse buttons, so we can click there about this Mac. System software 7.5.2. It's hard for me to read that. System enabler 1.0. Total memory 5 megs. So yeah, it's a Mac. So let's open up our boot thing. There you go. We've got a nice Mac window. We can drag it around. And I think somehow this may actually be clearer on the camera than it is to my eyes. But yeah, these are all the bits that this Pippin has. So that's kind of Pippin's version of Finder and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a Mac. And so yeah, the final kind of proof that this is indeed a power Mac. And you can extend this. You can genuinely use it as a power Mac by putting extra memory in, a SCSI hard drive and all sorts. There's all sorts of very clever people have made lots of additions to this. Right. That's probably enough of that. Let's wrap up. Right, I wanted the Pippin in the background whilst I did the outro, even though I will have to compete with the sound of the Pippin. Hopefully it's not too bad. My audio recorder is fairly good at separating sound out. But yeah, the Apple Pippin. It's been fairly badly done by people saying it's a failed console stuff. It wasn't really ever designed to be a console, even though it could play games, including the wonderful Marathon. But it also failed at being what it wanted to be, which was a kind of a box that sat underneath the television, because it just didn't. There was no niche there for it to fit in. And other machines, of course, had the same experience. The CD-TV and Philips CDI series, they also failed. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting machine. It is just a Mac in a specially designed software, specially designed case that could just be used normally. It was massively over-engineered, which made it expensive, but yeah, it's still a wonderful piece of hardware. And like you can see, classic MacOS running behind me. Absolutely, it's a Mac. It's a PowerPC Mac. Right, thanks for watching. If you like the video, please hit like. If you really like the video, please hit subscribe. If you didn't like the video or you have something else to say, then please leave it in the comments below. And also, please don't forget to check out all of the other wonderful Marchintosh videos. I'll put a link in below so you can kind of get an easy to read list of those. Some of the people that are making videos they are way better than me at Mac stuff. So there will be some truly excellent videos. I am absolutely sure of that. Yeah, don't forget the bell icon as well, so you can get told when I release a new video. See you next time.
The present is horrible, the future looks bleak. Remember our childhood to get us through the week. We're getting re-enthused, back to the past and the things we used. We all know that our pasts were great, escaping the things that today we hate. Getting re-enthused, getting re-enthused, getting re-enthused, getting re-enthused.